Jazzcast Pros.
There are known knowns. There are things we know that we know. There are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things we know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. These are the things we don't know we don't know. Donald Rumsfeld. One of these unknowns, what are the hidden disruptors that could be keeping you up at night? Welcome back to the Doze Podcast. If you found yourself here, then you're probably one of the many looking to put your sleep challenges to bed and to figure out how to wake up feeling more rested and energized. I'm your host, Soda Kuczkowski. I'm a sleep coach and educator with over 18 years helping individuals like you optimize their days to transform their nights. I'm excited to jump right into my series for May, Better Sleep Month, with a candid conversation with Dr. Daniel Gartenberg, the visionary behind the SleepSpace app. Holding a PhD in applied psychology and boasting over 15 years of pioneering research, Dr. Gartenberg has dramatically shaped our understanding of how sleep affects memory, cognition, and overall health. As an innovator in sleep technology, he introduced one of the earliest alarm clocks that does more than wake you. It monitors your sleep, highlighting his dedication to enhancing sleep quality through cutting-edge solutions. Today, Dr. Gartenberg continues to lead the field by merging elements like sound, light, temperature, and vibration to create better sleep environments. His work places sleep as a core component of health on par with diet and exercise. In our conversation, we'll dive into the hidden disruptors of sleep, including electromagnetic fields, ambient noise, and undiagnosed medical conditions, and we'll discover how his SleepSpace app and research are helping us navigate towards achieving more optimal sleep.
Hello, Dr. Dan Gartenberg here, CEO of SleepSpace, and I'm happy to announce a special promotion with Start With Sleep, where you can now get 30 days of SleepSpace completely for free with the code sleepspace.com/start-with-sleep, and you will get 30 days of SleepSpace completely free. You'll unlock features that include sounds to help you wind down, sleep deeper, and wake up in a lighter sleep stage. It also has meditations and integration with various wearables so you can accurately track your sleep and detect your circadian rhythm. So again, that's sleepspace.com/start-with-sleep to get 30 days free of the software today.
I wanted to start off just by talking about, what sparked your sleep journey. I know in previous conversations, you've talked about the fact that you yourself have had issues with your sleep. But in terms of following this course of study and getting into the space of sleep tech, was there any particular moment that you remember that you're like, you just said to yourself, like, this is my passion. This is where I want to spend my life learning and evolving and, changing the way that we see this?
Yeah, probably my passion for sleep started in college. I was always interested in psychology, but I took a course with the famous sleep researchers, Giuliano Tononi and his wife, who's also a sleep researcher. And they really opened my eyes to the world of sleep. And it was this beautiful combination of things I was interested in: psychology, how we make meaning into the world, neuroscience, AI. And I think his theory gets a little bit nerdy, but called the synaptic homeostasis hypothesis, which is basically a theory for how sleep helps us process information in the world. That is what made me see how big sleep can be. So if we could improve sleep, we can literally improve how we process the world. And, I'm someone who always believes that I see the good in people, and I think that a lot of the bad is just we've gotten programmed with the bad. So I just see this big idea of what if we can reprogram our minds? And that is something that has just captivated me since I was in college. So that's what's driven me in this space largely. I've also dealt with sleep issues, insomnia. I've dealt with delayed sleep phase, as I mentioned, in high school. And recently I self-diagnosed and then formally diagnosed with mild sleep apnea. So personally, I've dealt with a lot of the issues, and that's partly what's motivated my continued effort to solve those problems, both for myself and for others.
People don't know what they don't know. I mean, being a sleep researcher and scientist and then finding out that you yourself, had your own sleep challenges and not even being aware of it, because that's the thing. There's so much to learn about sleep. And, when we talk about things like sleep hygiene or lifestyle factors or behavioral, there's so many things that could be going on with our sleep at one given time. And that's why it's so important to speak to the right professional and speak to someone who can kind of help you navigate through the information.
No, I mean, totally. And I like to think about what is the causal mechanism here. And sometimes that can get missed in the medical community. This isn't sleep related, but a great example that comes to my mind is my wife, when she was younger, kept getting a racing heart rate. They thought that she had anxiety, so they gave anxiety medications, but it turned out she had this thing called WPD, which is basically a 16-chamber heart that makes the heart beat faster. It's treatable, but she was anxious not because of anxiety, or she had anxiety, but it was caused by a racing heart. It wasn't caused by a cycle. And once you fix the heart, then the anxiety went away. So I think that understanding what's causally happening is super important. And so, a good example is applying this to sleep now. A lot of times when people have insomnia, a good portion also have sleep apnea. If you have sleep apnea, a good portion also have insomnia. I think as much as 40% of people with apnea also have insomnia. So what's probably happening is the apnea is causing you to have lighter sleep. If you treat the sleep apnea, it can help, even though usually if you treat the sleep apnea, the insomnia gets worse for a little bit. So it's a little bit counterintuitive. But I think theoretically, part of what's causing the insomnia is lighter sleep from the apnea. So there's sort of an order of operations of solving the problems. Square one is dealing with if there's a physiological problem, like not breathing throughout the night. That's the first thing you really should try to address.
Oh, absolutely. That's that foundational piece, because you have to rule out the sleep disorder before you get into anything else. And exactly. I think that's why the technology is heavily leaned now into home sleep testing, because, people are very apprehensive to go into a sleep lab. But kind of diving into, our talk about technology and the application that you have with SleepSpace and how this can actually help individuals kind of identify what's going on. Because the thing is, we know that while the sleep problem continues to grow larger, on a global scale, the number of individuals in this industry, maybe in our circle, because we see all these posts, we think there's all these people doing sleep. There really aren't, right? So if you're in any given area, like in New York, we have more sleep doctors or more psychologists in this area. But if you go somewhere like Alabama or Colorado, they're very far and few between, right? So finding the help that you need isn't always available. So that's where something like a piece of technology like your application SleepSpace can help guide an individual, right? So can you share with us a little bit about your application, what it does, and how that kind of addresses kind of that gap that we see?
Yes, and you're so right. I mean, I think in the state of Alabama, the statistic is there's maybe one person trained in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia in the whole state. It might even be 0 people.
I know there's a lot of states that have 0.
Yeah, I think it might be one of the zeros. So, I mean, that's a real problem because, most of these psychologists can only practice in the state that they're licensed in. So there's literally not a single person that can help an insomniac in some of these states. So it's a huge issue, and that's actually how we motivate to the NIH that, we need to make technology to help solve this problem. Technology can solve this problem, and it is. So a good example is getting people to get diagnosed with these sleep disorders. There's so many people that probably have mild sleep apnea that are undiagnosed. It's a huge problem. So we'll enable you to listen to your snore. A lot of times your spouse will be can you believe what you sound? Because you have no idea oftentimes how bad it is. So oftentimes the process for getting people to get help is not them caring about themselves, but their wife frustrated with or husband frustrated with the noise that they're making. And they're like, please solve this problem. You're disrupting my sleep. So kicking off this process of easily enabling someone to listen back to their snore. Then it's like, I actually have a YouTube video you can go to that just like, this is totally free. You can just listen to a normal snore versus the sleep apnea snore. A normal snore, any snoring is not great. You don't want to snore. But a sleep apnea snore is particularly bad. And a sleep apnea snore won't have that rhythmic breathing thing going on. There'll be long gaps. Sometimes it's unbelievable, but you won't breathe for 30 seconds, like a minute even. It'll just be like nothing happening. And then it'll be a big rush of air because you're gasping to get the air after not breathing. So it's a pretty distinct, you can sort of listen. Someone trained in this will be like, oh yeah, that's a sleep apnea sound for sure.
Well, I'll make sure to drop a link to that in the show notes.
It's helpful.
No, because with spouses, it's usually that cessation of breath, that pausing in the breath that is of concern, especially if they hear how that's tied to, your cardiovascular health. Then they go running for, you need a sleep study.
Yeah, and just to scare people, there's a great this study done in Wisconsin on untreated sleep apnea. It's this famous longitudinal study. Showed that it decreases your life expectancy by around 5.2 years or something like that when you go untreated for sleep apnea. So it's a really important thing. Cardiovascular health, hypertension, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, it's related. So once you listen to your horrible snore, if you have it, then we have a way of easily getting you diagnosed. And there's a bunch of tools right now. We really like Whisper. I think you know them. It's a pretty sophisticated device. It's just 2 patches that you can place on your stomach. And you can get this. I can drop a code for it too in the chat. I give a demo. This is how I identified my issue. So it'll create data that a doctor can use to diagnose sleep apnea. So
I did get signed up with Whisper, so I'll make sure to drop that link.
Oh, very good, very good. So you just track for 3 days. I think you ship it back to them after a month, and it's like $79. That's just for producing the data. Then a doctor has to look at the data to give you the diagnosis. But basically, you can get a pretty good sense of it just from looking at the data if you have a problem or not. And that's where we have coaches that can help you look at the data, kind of walk you through it. And then, Soda's one of our coaches, but we have a bunch of others too.
That are all focused on different sectors of, not to interrupt you, different sectors of sleep. So you have, while I work on shift work, there's another woman who focuses on different types of shift work. You've got parenting, you've got teen. So there's just a number of different type of specialists on there that can really help you based on your demographic.
Exactly. Yeah. And we have a breathing specialist person, a menopause specialist.
I have well, sleep is connected to every single part of who we are, how we function. I tell people from A to Z, there isn't anything that you can't tie particularly to the quality of your sleep, right? Like your longevity, like your health, your physical stamina, recovery time. There's so much.
The A to the Z's of sleep.
Well, I always say I've called on everything from allergists to urologists to talk to them about how sleep, and they're like, sleep isn't anything with my practice. And I'm like, are you serious?
No, but definitely, that was another win that I had is I kept snoring, and it turned out it was dust mites. And so the allergist actually helped me identify that. It's like, oh, you're super allergic to dust mites. Now we have this special bedding that we use. But yeah,
well, air quality is a huge one. Air quality.
Yeah, we have these crazy filters. You should see this thing that's right next to me right now.
Yeah, for even when someone has sleep apnea, CPAP therapy or getting like a mandibular device, like that isn't a standalone, right? You have to look at your bedding, your humidity, your temperature, your air quality, how often you're cleaning what products you're using. If you walk around with shoes on in your home, how often you open up the windows. Like there's so many, like you said, those things where you wouldn't think that they would have such an effect on your sleep, but they absolutely do. Yeah. Like, I mean, I can't tell you, when I have someone clean their space, they're like, it can't be that simple. And it's like, sometimes it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, trying to make our bed now with the newborn, I've been slacking a little bit, but we make our bed every day. So there's like the ritual of getting into the bed and keeping it clean and stuff like that. But for sure. And the nice thing is some of these things, once you do it once, you've accomplished it forever. So like one of the biggest wins for me was these blackout curtains that we have. It might be annoying to get it set up, but once you have it, you're done. It's not like having to exercise every day where you have to constantly put in the effort. So that's the other reason I like sleep is I like the pragmatic solutions that solve the problem one and done. I use the MAD, by the way, is my...
Have you found a lot of success with the one that you've been using?
So, I mean, my wife...
Your wife is like 2 thumbs up.
Yeah. So, and this is the interesting thing about it is I don't necessarily perceive a difference. Maybe I think I'm a little bit more alert when I use it. But my wife is definitely like, yeah, you don't snore when you use this thing. And sometimes I won't use it and she'll be like, please put it on, and then I'll stop. So there's a pretty clear causal interaction going on there. I'm about to do a formal validation study with them where this is the mad scientist in me. I'm going to not use it for a week and then use it for a week. And I'm actually going to try to show with the data. And, I'm guessing it'll work that I actually sleep better.
Well, subjectively right now, since you've been using it, do you feel like you're clear thinking? Do you feel like you have a newborn at home, so you're like, all of that's out the window.
There's so many factors. So that's like the hard thing about your subjective understanding of sleep. As a scientist, I also don't sometimes trust my subjectiveness. Like I'm suspicious of my own. Honestly, like right now, it's not a good time to measure because I'm literally on night shift, waking up every 2 hours to feed the baby. So, and that's another fact. And that's another thing to factor in.
No, absolutely. That's one of the things that I tell people when they ask me like what my best sleep tip is. I say to prioritize it, right? Because life happens and there's always going to be transitions. Like you've added a new member to your family, right? So your sleep schedule, your day schedule is different. If you change a job, if you move, like when you moved from Pennsylvania to New York City, or was it Washington you were living in?
Yeah.
So all these things are transitions that can affect our ability to sleep well. So we have to be proactive about it all the time. It isn't something that you can kind of just leave. Like something like your environment, absolutely. Making sure you have the darkening blinds, setting up lights, setting up reminders, to kind of have a wind down period. But there's always going to be something that's going to be thrown your way. So you have to be constantly thinking and prioritizing, like, how can this disrupted? What can I do? And like this. Yeah.
I like, what is the one thing I can do tonight to help my sleep? I like that thought experiment. But I guess the other thing is, if you are a type A person around some of this, also not to fret when something bad happens. Like it's normal if my grandma dies that I have a crummy night of sleep this night. I mean, don't be too hard on yourself. Sometimes people are too hard on themselves and then that makes them sleep even worse. Because, sleep is about letting go. It's not about perfecting everything in your sleep environment. Sometimes you can we want to perfect it, sure, but also don't feel like I don't have the sound machine now, I can't sleep anymore. You know what I mean? Sometimes it can have a negative effect too if you're too focused on all the solutions.
Well, that's, another argument against the technology, right? Because it's the more you try to control something, the less control you have over it.
Yeah. that is one of the negative parts of it. So being aware of that, and I think what you're drawing to a little bit is like metacognition, like your awareness of your awareness is really important here. So like knowing when you're particularly stressed, or knowing, yeah, it just moves, so I'm going to sleep not so good in this environment. But being okay with that, not being like this is the end of the world, might be a good suggestion for certain people, for sure.
But on the counterpart, I want to talk about your sleep application, because, in this application, you've really kind of curated this space where, not only does it block out EMF signals, those electromagnetic fields, because some people are more sensitive to that. It charges your phone wirelessly. It integrates with wearable devices. It has the sounds. Can you tell us a little bit about like how you've kind of put this together and why all of these different pieces are so important when talking about improving our sleep?
Yeah, thank you for letting me speak about it. I mean, it's a complicated piece of tech, so it'll work without any devices using the sensors of the phone. You can place it on your bedside, or you can place it on your bed itself as well. And we're basically measuring the motions of the through the phone, and also sound in the room, to measure sleep. Now, ideally, you wouldn't sleep with your phone in your bed, and we want to play the sounds very precisely on one side of the bed so they don't disturb your sleep partner. And that's why I invented I call it the SleepSpace smart bed. It's just a little phone charger that slides underneath your bed, and it allows us to play the sounds precisely on one side of your bed, because one of the common problems when you're playing sounds is I don't like wearing earbuds or anything like this. I don't like things touching me while I'm sleeping. But I also don't want to disturb my wife. She has different sound preferences for me. So we have this, basically it forms like a vortex of sound on my side of the bed. So there's some differential, because she actually likes the pink noise much louder than me. And she can get that through the speaker of her phone, because the phone is pointed downwards. So the speaker is actually going down on her side of the bed. So there's some nice differential with the sounds. And then it's also measuring sleep while putting your phone away from you in this EMF casing. So it's sort of solving the addiction problem of the phone as well. And those are the reasons I invented this weird contraption called the SleepSpace smart bed.
Yeah, but I mean, you've integrated so many different pieces into this, because it's, not only do you have the ability to chat with someone, there are programs that are available, the soundscapes. Can you kind of just walk us a little bit through kind of the usability of the app and what, I'm going to drop a link below for people to sign up. They get a 30-day free trial on this, but it's kind of so that they understand how it works and what they can expect.
Yeah, and I'm so happy to do this collaboration with you, where we're giving it away for everyone for free for 30 days, the software. When you do sleepspace.com/start with sleep, I think is the code that we have.
Yeah.
But you'll drop it down there. So basically, it's sort of like the all-in-one sleep app. So we'll integrate with all the wearables. We have our own algorithms for sensing. It'll integrate with the Oura Ring, with Whoop. We'll take in that data. We have a sleep diary, so you can also enter in your perceptions. You'll track. You'll use sounds. You'll use light to improve sleep. And then we have coaches or an AI guide called Dr. Snooze that can sort of hold your hand along the way and push you into these programs that are right for you. So, for example, we have a 6-week program based on cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, if that's the issue that you're dealing with. If you don't have that issue, you should probably do very different things than if you're just trying to improve your deep sleep as a biohacker, someone that doesn't want to get Alzheimer's disease when they get older, for example. That's a big demographic that we have. But the suggestions for that individual can almost be the opposite of what you would suggest for someone that's struggling with falling asleep and staying asleep. So we had to build this sort of complicated all-in-one solution in order to hit on all of the sleep problems and give the right customization to the right person.
So it's making it that diversify it so that regardless of who's coming to this piece of technology, they can benefit from it in one way or another. So it's not meant for just one type of individual.
Exactly. And I mean, I want to talk to you about this, Soda. We're about to onboard thousands of police officers from the UK. And
oh, wow.
They have their whole shift work stress issue that I think you would really potentially resonate with these folks. So I want to connect you with some of them. That's a big use case coming on.
Absolutely. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the attention being focused on. I mean, even with my business, when I first started, while I'd worked in the shift work space, I didn't really expect to kind of go down this road. But with correction and police and firefighters, all of those first responders, their sleep is top priority, right? Because it's not only personal safety, it's the public at large. So it's something that they really want to spend a lot of time and focus on to make sure that, they're taking care of them.
I actually came across the population of first responders to 9/11. There's actually a big group in the city and they have a lot of stress and also breathing issues from what happened to them. That's another demographic that I'm trying to tap into.
Well, you're gonna help everybody when you're done.
I hope, and you're gonna help me help everybody too along the way. So
we're gonna work together because that's one of the things. It's like even with remote conferencing and being able to help people. Again, we're very limited in terms of the number of individuals who are working respectively in this space. Even when you hear people get interviewed like on the news and so forth, it's always like the same half a dozen people that they're always quoting.
Yeah.
Dr. Michael Gardner, his name is on like everything.
Yeah. And I work with Gardner and a bunch of, I think that the sleep folks working together is going to be important for success because there's so many different solutions out there and being able to really touch people. I think we have to start working together more, not just all solving it on our own.
Oh, absolutely. When I came from sleep medicine, working in the clinical setting, that was one thing that I never understood. So we were affiliated, so we're an academic-based sleep lab, but we never worked with the behavioral research in the area. And I was like, well, why aren't we working here? That's where sleep is that multidimensional, right? Because there's the sleep doctors for sleep medicine. You have your clinical psychologists, your sleep techs, your sleep coaches, your sleep researchers and scientists, your innovators who are creating products. So there's so many different fields within this respective industry, but working together is where we're going to help find those personalized solutions that people are looking for, right? Because individually, we could kind of for a long time, it almost seemed like we'd say opposite things. It's like, a scientist would say this, but then someone who's in practical application would say something else. And that's where it's like, we have to work in tandem so that people know what to listen to. They don't get confused.
It's just like our medical system. It's all divided and there's no actual sleep specialists. There's a pulmonologist, there's sleep labs, but there's no specialty general sleep, and I think that's part of the problem.
I know. I explain that to people that I worked under a pulmonologist, a neurologist. Right. Those are different types of sleep doctors with respective different focuses. Yeah. So it's like, if you have something like narcolepsy, you're better off going to the neurologist who's a sleep doctor, right? So it's like, but they don't know to ask for those things.
Right. And
or
then
to look obviously for those things.
A dentist plays a role, a GP plays a role. Basically every doctor has a little sliver. Some have a bigger sliver, but they don't really work together in the whole pie of things very well.
Well, that's one of the controversies now because, there aren't a lot of board certified sleep dentists, right? So while a dentist is a great gateway, because obviously they're evaluating the airway, not all of them are qualified, right? Even if they have a sleep testing device to be able to help you in the right way if they haven't had that formal training, right? So it's like we need more dentists really focused on sleep and as part of their overall curriculum, not as a side to it. It has to be integrated into that.
No, I definitely see that because you see a dentist a lot. You would think that they could play a bigger role in solving this.
Now, what I'm saying, in terms of their education, having that integrated from the beginning, because in pediatrics, we're seeing so many of the narrowing airways or the tongue ties, in babies, there's so much with the disordered breathing that it isn't getting addressed until they're a teenager, they're well into, being an adult, and they've suffered their whole lives not recognizing that there was something that was there that could have been addressed early on.
And I'm just curious, how many of these like issues of behavior, instead of taking ADD medicine, it's just a matter of your child is not sleeping properly. I really think it's common.
That's one of the initiatives that I had taken on, was trying to get training for school nurses, because they're the ones there on site. And when they're doing this like ADHD evaluation, looking for sleep disorders or sleep apnea, right? Because it presents very differently in children, and having this kind of assessment that they're doing alongside that, because it's never a conversation, because people are like, a sleep doctor, that's like a real thing, or sleep health, that's like, they think about fitness, they think about nutrition, but they don't think about the sleep component. And exactly what you said, it affects brain development, it affects physical development, their emotional resilience. Like, there's so many different, it's connected to every part of us, right? And as they grow, if we're not addressing sleep or prioritizing it, this is why we're seeing this kind of kick down the line, and why sleep is such an issue for so many people.
I'm so happy you're doing that. I love that. That's so cool.
Listen, anywhere that I can put myself, I'm like, you know what you should do? And that's the thing. Like, I can't do it on my own. I'm always like, when someone's interested in sleep, I'm like, what industry you should tap into, because we need more voices and more education in different spaces, because honestly, we can be everywhere. I mean, you already touched on things like dementia and Alzheimer's, like the association, even locally, I've talked to them for years about the correlation, but it's only when, Biden had CPAP marks on his face that people were like, oh, is there something going on? Like, it's like, why does it take something bigger for that conversation to happen when you have researchers that are telling you all of these things that are correlated and what we should be paying attention to? Even if we're not 100% there, it should be part of that conversation.
Yeah. And I mean, doctors just aren't trained in sleep. That's I think a big reason that it's not part.
No, absolutely. Another program I like to do with schools is STEM careers in sleep. Like, who's going to invent the next great thing? Because there's just so much opportunity with that. So what advice would you give to aspiring sleep scientists or entrepreneurs looking to enter the sleep technology space?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of sleep labs. At almost every major research university will have a sleep lab. So I would start by just being a research assistant in a sleep lab. And you can come at it from multiple angles. I came at it from psychology. You can come at it from biology. They're also looking for computer programmers to some degree as well. There's a big data analysis problem when it comes to sleep. So knowing how to analyze big data sets with like statistical programming software is super useful to a lot of sleep labs. You can even, find your local sleep clinic and work as a tech for a while, and then pivot in that way. I've seen that happen a few times as well. Learning how to administer polysomnography to people, and then getting more involved in the research that way.
I know when I worked in the clinic setting, that was a big push for me. Like, every doctor who came through the fellowship program, I'm like, so are you going to study sleep medicine? And they're like, no, I'm not. And then I did a program, the lab that I was working with, I coordinated a program through Geneseo College for sleep technicians. So they did exactly that. The technologists came in, they kind of shadowed while they were going through this program, and they built an entire associate's degree around it here. It's outside of right outside of Western New York, kind of in the outskirts in the country. But because there was a shortage of sleep techs at one time. But now, with AI, some of that is getting replaced, which is why it's great to see that they can move into these new roles as sleep coaches or navigators and really open up the space in a new way.
Yeah, and there's these new certificates as well.
The CCSH?
Yes, CCSH, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think Michael Granner is working on a coaching. There's a bunch of like coaching certificates that you can get. I think he's working on like a more validated coaching certificate as well. So there's lots of ways to get into the space.
Yeah, he's amazing, because I mean, I've been in sleep medicine now just under 18 years, and with coaching, I think over the last 10 or 11, and they had me, I was with Emerson Kerr, who I know you know, a keynote for their conference. And we were talking, they brought in the sleep coaching component because he said, we can no longer ignore this. This is a missing piece because it's that the application of what we're learning in terms of the science and research. Like, how do we make this applicable to people's lives? And coaching is a very big part of that because it's that, obviously working directly with patients and meeting them where they're at.
Yeah, there's a role for the coach. I mean, and obviously the clinicians sort of sometimes hate the coaches, but there's a role for the clinician.
Time constraints too. So
yeah, and there's not enough clinicians. So I mean, obviously, if someone has a medical problem, they should see a medical professional. But there's also like maintenance and stuff where you don't necessarily have the problem, and there's definitely a place for the coach.
Absolutely. Well, I am a coach, so I appreciate that.
But you're also sort of speaking more broadly to audiences about the
sleep health,
sleep health in general. You're like a keynote speaker too.
I just share everything that you research. When you research everything, I go out and I share it with the public. So that's what I do. I'm that extra voice to get that information disseminated into all the different places that it needs to be so that people understand what they need to know.
And doing the group coaching, I think, is a pretty novel idea too. And I think it makes a lot of sense. Speaking to 30 people at a time instead of one-on-one.
But yeah, and I think when people see that other individuals are, having the same challenges, it takes away some of that stigma. Because I think that's one of the things too, when it comes to sleep apnea. I've seen so many people who put it off for years because they're like, it's not just about not wearing that machine. They don't want to be labeled. It's like this negative thing, but it's like, well, if you get diagnosed with something and you find a therapy for it and it's able to make you feel more clearer of your mind and more physically active and help you live longer, why wouldn't you want to do that thing, right?
Exactly.
But we get so scared of going to doctors, we think it's going to be a lot more complicated than it actually is.
Yeah, and the group thing totally helps with that. You get, 5 people with the problem that's the same. I think it's really motivating, so it makes a lot of sense.
Oh yeah, it just takes one person to say, oh my God, I can't believe that I ever lived without my CPAP machine. Right. It's been a game changer. It's changed my life. And then people, kind of open their minds to something that previously they wouldn't have been.
Yeah, and I think the science backs up the group therapy thing. Makes sense.
Well, I'm going to make sure to drop the links for everything that we've talked about today, your TED Talk, the SleepSpace app, the Whisper, and so forth. But just to close this off, is there anything, additional either about the SleepSpace app or that you want to share with our listeners?
The one thing I like to take people away with is think about your sleep. Think about how you slept last night or the last week. Is there anything that you can do to improve it? Is it a better temperature environment? Is it sounds? Is it adjusting your light more? There's usually at least 1 or 2 things that you could do tonight to improve your sleep quality. So I'll just leave your listeners with that moment to think about what that might be for you.
Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you so much again for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, thank you for listening. I'm back every Wednesday with a new episode, ready to share my knowledge and empower you to take control of your sleep. If you've enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe to the Doze Podcast. I still have lots to share with you as we work together towards creating solutions around your unique sleep challenges and needs. Until then, remember your pure potential if you change how well you sleep.